Welcome, Marianne. Welcome. Welcome, Detris. Welcome, Dawn. Miss Daniels. All right, we got some Sunshine State ESOL friends. Hello, Andrea. Okay, everybody. Well, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. As we all always like to do, I like to have a little intro music just to set the vibe, set the mood. I know we're all working hard these days, and a little music is just good medicine, right? So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Stella from Miami Springs. Yes. All right. So good to see everybody from all over the state. Graceful. Nice. It's just so nice to see how connected we are in this community of practice that we have as adult ESOL educators. It's so important. It's one reason why I love IPDE so much, is it provides this space for all of us to connect from all over the state, all over the nation, all over the world. I'm actually joining us today from Bodrum, Turkey. Let me know if you've ever been to Bodrum, Turkey, but that's where I am right now. And it's just such an honor to be here with you all. My hometown is, I consider, Tallahassee, Florida. So give it up for the 850 over there. All right, everybody, as people are, our friends are joining us today, if you could also please type in the chat, Gainesville. I had to say hi to Gainesville. I have a lot of good friends and colleagues in Gainesville, Santa Fe College. If you would, please type in the chat, what attracted you to this webinar today? If you can share that with us, that would be helpful to see what attracted you to this webinar today. Please type that in the chat. I'm going to be calling on you a lot during this webinar, and I'll explain just why that is here in a moment. But thank you, Christine. Our students are a wealth of knowledge. Yes, absolutely. So as you all are typing that in the chat, I want to just again thank you for being present today, either by being with us right now live or viewing this video later. I also want to support your intentional decision on creating the time and space in your day for professional development, for professional growth. You know, we don't only benefit that as individuals, but our colleagues do as well. Our students surely do, and I believe our community and nation as a whole, and even our world, benefits from our growth and professional development. So my name is Ramin Yazdan Pana, and I have the honor and pleasure to lead us in our final webinar of this summer. Deficits Defeat, Empowerment Excites, Leveraging the Funds of Knowledge of Our Adult ESOL Learners. So you might notice that I modified the title of this webinar in a couple of ways. And I tend to do that as I just, you know, I'm developing the presentations, and of course things evolve. But the reason that I modified a bit the presentation title is to first focus on the central aspect of this webinar and this topic, and that is a positive psychology approach to teaching and learning. You know, as educators, we often focus on what students lack and how they are lacking proficiency, right? Or even maybe how they're deficient in some kind of ways. A positive psychology approach intentionally chooses to focus on what strengths people bring with them and how to utilize and build from these strengths to build greater confidence, motivation, and to ultimately to learn and to meet learning goals. So everyone in adult ESOL programs brings rich funds of knowledge across language, culture, academics, as well as life and work skills. You know, leveraging these resources, not only tapping into them, but leveraging these resources these funds of knowledge, creates a classroom community based on respect and cross-cultural understanding. So this enriching environment, of course, increases learner and teacher motivation, well-being, and helps students to connect to content. So throughout this webinar, as I said, I'll be calling on you, my colleagues, my friends, my fellow adult ESOL educators to share your perspectives, ideas, and resources so that we can leverage the wealth of knowledge from our community of teaching practice. So, so let me see here. I'm just looking here at some of the responses. So we say, yes, Christine, our students are a wealth of knowledge. Lori, adult ESOL learners come into our classes with a long list of experiences. Absolutely. Teacher students empowerment. You all, what I love here is I'm preaching to the choir, but that's so important because we need to reinforce what our practice is and learn from each other and how we're applying our funds of knowledge. So yes, thank you, Marianne. And over 22 years of experience, I've learned so much from my adult ed students. Isn't that the truth? And Edwina, always looking to learn more to help my ESOL students. Okay, thanks, Guy, for sharing that resource there. Also, just to keep in mind that this will be this presentation is recorded and will be provided on the IPDAY website within 48 hours. So moving on here, just a few key points to remember. So let me see here. Yes, okay. So as we're doing right now, I'd like us to use the chat option for interaction during our webinar today. And feel free to use, exclamation points, emojis, anything to express your tone and emotion. You'll only be in listen mode, so the more you can engage in the chat, the better. And don't worry, I'll prompt you throughout this webinar. So I'd like to just thank the positive and brilliant IPDAY team for their support. Thank you all so much for this series of webinars this year. Keep up the fantastic work. You are important. The work that you're doing is valued and critical, so thank you. As I mentioned before, they provided this presentation in PDF format on the IPDAY website, and the recording will be available within 48 hours for review and sharing. So, hey, listen, I sincerely hope that your experience in this webinar contributes positively to your professional development. So with that, I'm just going to pause my video here. I'll be back for the Q&A, but just to kind of focus on what we are engaged in here with the slides, but I will be back, please don't worry. Okay, before we jump in, just a quick reminder, or if you don't know this, a quick announcement that there are courses being offered through IPDAY, and these are professional development courses, and they're opportunities to engage in sustained high-quality professional development through a community of teachers and teaching practice. So there are two courses. Introduction to Teaching Adult ESOL is course 1, and course 2 is Teaching Adult ESOL for Life and Work Skills. By completing these courses, you receive a 50-hour certificate for each course. The cost is completely free as they are funded by our dear friends and colleagues at the Florida Department of Education and provided through IPDAY of Florida. So for more information about that, please contact June Rawl, the IPDAY director, and there is June's email contact. I'm actually going to paste this in the chat. So if you want to copy that, there it is. Okay, so a bit of an overview here. So defining funds of knowledge, rationale, how to identify funds of knowledge, how to apply funds of knowledge, and some resources that I'd like to share with you. And then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Okay, so funds of knowledge can be described as the historical accumulation of abilities, bodies of knowledge, and assets, cultural ways of interacting that adults bring with them. Commonly held assumptions based on deficit thinking possess that adult learners lack cultural language and interest in learning. Deficit thinking ideology also presents low ambition, low self-esteem, and emotional instability, as well as a lack of discipline as sources of illiteracy. A different approach in adult literacy envisions English learners from an assets-based perspective, debunking this deficit ideology. A funds of knowledge approach to adult learning and teaching employs culturally relevant processes to enhance the work and life trajectories of learners, disrupting deficit perspectives that envision learners as lacking in language and culture. So instructors shift attention to what learners bring with them to the education process and intentionally co-construct knowledge with learners. This requires looking at what learners can do as a whole person, right? Their histories, identities, language experiences, attitudes, values. Using a funds of knowledge approach requires investigating what our students are doing outside the classroom to learn, practice, and apply English in various ways. So this can include at home, in their communities, and in the workplace. As clearly stated in the English language proficiency standards for adult education, Adult L's funds of knowledge are a resource for learning and for teaching. Adult L's have a rich reservoir of social, linguistic, and cultural experiences from which they can draw as they learn English. These funds of knowledge can be invaluable in supporting their language development and linguistic competency. It is so important to recognize, value, and build on the social, cultural, and linguistic backgrounds of students to maximize the benefit of these resources. Understanding our students' individual identities can play a role in planning instruction and assessment. For example, provide opportunities for students to learn new skills and information by connecting instruction to their lives outside of the classroom. It is within the ESL classroom that we can create a safe learning environment where students feel confident to use English, as well as share their experiences, questions, challenges, and success with others. As we all know and have personally experienced, when we feel safe and confident in the learning environment, we are more motivated to take risks and to participate and contribute to class activities. All of this fosters an environment that cultivates student and teacher well-being and creates a virtuous cycle of learning that excites and empowers. So with that, as educators, we also bring our own funds of knowledge that support and influence our expectations of teaching and learning. So for this short activity, I'd like us to do the following. Please share the funds of knowledge that you bring and contribute to the classroom or the program that you might coordinate or administer. What abilities, bodies of knowledge, assets, and cultural ways of interacting do you bring to the classroom and or your program? So I'm going to ask you to not be humble. Seeing these strengths in others can also help us to see the strengths in ourselves. So again, please write in the chat if you would. What abilities, knowledge, mindsets, what funds of knowledge do you bring to the classroom and to your program? And so as you're formulating your ideas, and thank you, Debbie, empathy, yes. As you are sharing this here, I'd like to share a little bit of this image here. So this is when I was a fellow with the US Department of State Fellows Program in Vietnam. And as you can see here, for extra credit, these instruments here, if you can identify what these instruments are. So this long stick here is actually an instrument called the didgeridoo. And this drum here is called a handpan. And so I brought these instruments with me to the classroom uh, because that was an asset, right? Those were a skill set that I was able to bring to the classroom to connect, right? To connect with students, for students to know who I am, and for me to leverage my abilities, not only as an educator, but also in this case as a musician, uh, to connect with students, to build a classroom that shares who I am, and to apply those skill sets to the teaching of English and to the exchange of culture and education for diplomacy between the United States and Vietnam. So let me see here. Let me get back to the chat. Yes. So Christine, knowledge about healthcare, fantastic. Lori, active community member, parent, volunteer, neighbor, advocate, fantastic. They're rolling in here. I love this. Shannon, American culture knowledge, understanding of workplace norms, grammar knowledge, yes, teaching methods. Oh, so much here. Nice. FANE certified reading specialist. So as we can see here, there's just a wealth of funds of knowledge that we bring as educators. And so I encourage you that you can engage with a similar discussion with your students and your colleagues, reflecting on and sharing the funds of knowledge that you all bring, that we bring to the classroom, to our programs, and celebrating those, and then brainstorming on how we can apply and leverage those funds of knowledge. Right now, I will say that we should keep in mind that some of our students and maybe even some of our colleagues might not be immediately comfortable discussing their strengths, as they might be coming from cultures or have a personality that may want to avoid standing out, right? Or view such discussions as boasting. One suggestion is to discuss how seeing and sharing strengths could be done in a respectful way to learn about others. So this is just as much about a listening skill to build understanding and empathy as it is about a speaking skill to talk about oneself, right? So yes, I'm just coming back here. Accountability, business skills, fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing some of your funds of knowledge that you bring as educators. Okay, so let's look at some additional activities that facilitate reflection and the sharing of funds of knowledge. So we see here on this list here, questionnaires can be great ways to explicitly ask about the funds of knowledge that our students bring with them. And that can be across any of these kind of categories. Here's just some that come from this funds of knowledge inventory matrix. But they can be about, their understanding of any of these categories around cooking, around music, around the community, around any of those those funds of knowledge that you all listed here, right? About language, about specializing in certain areas. So many times we just don't, of course, we're so focused on activities and lessons that sometimes we don't pause enough to engage in these kind of discussions and explorations of funds of knowledge of our students. So taking that and having an ongoing kind of interaction and discussion about this is something that I would recommend. Multiple intelligence inventories or learning style inventories, journals are a great way to actively engage in discovering and having our students to reflect on their funds of knowledge and sharing them. Presentations are obviously great ways. Storybooks, interviews, those can be interviews that students do with each other to discover each other's funds of knowledge. And ethnographic projects. So this is something that funds of knowledge approaches have been really advocating for. And that's, if possible, to actually engage in ethnographic projects where it can either be auto ethnographic projects where you ask your students to document their lives, and to share that, so that can be rich knowledge to understand how our students are using and applying and interacting in English outside of the classroom. Again, whether that be at home, in their communities, um, as well as in their workplace. This funds of knowledge inventory here, this is a great matrix that you can use to, once you have kind of collected these funds of knowledge and these across these different categories, then start to brainstorm classroom applications. So I'm just coming back here to the chat because I'm seeing that you all are just sharing some incredible wealth of knowledge here. So I'm seeing here, Paul says as a cultural anthropologist, PhD Harvard with extensive research in Turkey. Hey, Paul, I see what you describe as an anthropological way of learning about another people and their cultures, or students, our teachers, we are learners. Boom. Exactly, Paul. That's exactly what we're engaging here. So being curious, right? We are providing the approach, as you mentioned here, this ethnographic approach to being curious and to exploring, right? Exploring our world, exploring other worlds, and these kind of tools, these kind of activities can be incredible language learning and culture learning activities as well. So with that said, I want us to share a little bit about what funds of knowledge do your students bring to your classroom or program. So if you could share that a bit now, moving on from us as educators to now reflecting on our students and what we know about them. What are some of the funds of knowledge that our students bring to our program? And you can use these categories as we see here on this matrix, or it can be anything. But if you would, just please share some of the funds of knowledge that your students bring to the classroom or to your program. And plant specialists, thank you, Christine. That's perfect. Yes, I've had many conversations with my students about plants and taking care of plants, pruning plants, transplanting plants. I'm a gardener enthusiast, so I love engaging in those kinds of conversations. And again, just an opportunity to connect and deepen relationships with students. Marianne, doctors, dentists, yes, okay, periodontists, accountants. Wow. I mean, talk about a wealth of expertise and getting some free advice, professional advice even. Yeah, medical specialist. We made medicinal organic teas after planting them. What? Oh my God, Angela, that's amazing. They're rich experiences in most of these funds of knowledge areas. Absolutely. So you can see how we could really base a whole curriculum off of our students' funds of knowledge. But with that said, we can definitely connect the current curriculum that we're teaching to our students' funds of knowledge in one way or another. And that's what we're going to explore here a little bit next. So here's some examples of connecting these funds of knowledge here in this these examples here around agriculture and cooking. So we see here this example with home community practices. And it says, here in the backyard, Ruby shows me where her father would be planting tomatoes this summer. So this is actually based off of an ethnographic project that a teacher did, where they visited Ruby's home. And so Ruby was able to kind of show that, right, where her father would be planting tomatoes this summer. And so a potential classroom application of this would be to use this idea to create a classroom garden or talk about plant growth and science, or maybe even plant medicinal herbs and make delicious teas out of them. All right. So another's cooking, right? So Ruby's mother was cooking while I visited. She was in the process of making plátanos con frijoles y crema, and I had never tried this before, so I knew it was one of their family's favorite recipes. Oh, I'm getting hungry just reading that. But the classroom application could be, I could work on procedural vocabulary by having students work with their parents to write their favorite recipes. This would also apply to math by pointing out quantity words in addition to measurements. I'm just coming back here to the chat here. Marianne, my Haitian students talked about being in the big earthquake a few years ago. Thank you for bringing that up. I love to get my news, my global news from students, right, and get different perspectives, some real perspectives on oftentimes a limited perspective that we get through the media. So getting those personal examples, those personal experiences and stories just adds to our understanding of not only our students, but of the world that we live in. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so here's another example here of how to potentially apply funds of knowledge. And this is across the English language proficiency standards. So, having this kind of table where you line up the English language proficiency standards and then brainstorm activities of how to apply funds of knowledge to meet these standards. So the ELPS 1 standard is construct meaning from oral presentations and texts. And so obviously an activity here could be to compare information to experience and cultural lens, right? So, actually presenting things and understanding how our cultural lenses might affect how we see the world. The next is exchange information, ideas, and analyses, responding to peer, audience, or reader comments and questions. So this is obviously interviews, breakout rooms if you're teaching online, panel discussions, discussion boards. So these are ways to exchange in this information and cross-cultural, intercultural exchange. ELPS Standard 3, speak and write about complex literary and informational texts and topics. So this could be journal writing, stories that facilitate the exploration of funds of knowledge and the sharing. ELPS 4, construct oral and written claims and support them with reasoning and evidence, preparing for an interview that leverages their funds of knowledge, right? How can we enable our learners to say, hey, you're preparing for an interview, let's reflect on our strengths and be prepared to present those, right? Our students, just from the get-go, besides all their professional experience, have amazing intercultural experience, communication experience, linguistic experience. They're risk takers, so much that they can present in an interview to a potential employer. The next standard, ELPS 5, is conduct research and evaluate and communicate findings to answer questions or solve problems. So those could be ethnographic projects or those auto-ethnographic projects that we discussed earlier. ELPS 6, analyze and critique the arguments of others. So that can be compare information, right, to say, hey, what are the different ways of maybe viewing a certain topic, right? Maybe even a certain controversial topic. So those are great critical thinking skills that we can develop and apply, and also do in a respectful way, right? So how can we engage in conversations that are respectful, that are critical, but also constructive, and that are enabling everyone to grow their skills, knowledge, attitudes, and of course their communication skills. ELPS 7, adapt language choices to purpose, task, and audience when speaking and writing. So this could be an excellent place to discuss pragmatics and speech acts, right? So that's basically, how does culture affect our expectations of how we interact? How does that affect for example, a speech act can be how we maybe request something, right? How does age or our relationship to the speaker, how does our expectations of directness, all of these things are different dimensions of communication that our adult learners are fully aware of actually in their first language, but they need our support in understanding how to transfer those skills over to this new cultural and linguistic environment. ELPS 8 is determine the meaning of words and phrases in oral presentations and literary and informational texts. So this can be to compare form, function, and use of languages, right? To say, hey, okay, well, how does this grammar form that we're learning, what are the different form, functions, and use of it in for example, Haitian Creole, right, versus English, and having that kind of analysis, that comparative analysis across languages, not only informs the students, but also informs us as educators in understanding the languages that our students bring to the classroom. So ELPS 9, create clear and coherent level appropriate speech and text. So this can be sentence level examples and responses about funds of knowledge. So this is great to, think about how we can differentiate these activities from the word or sentence level even, and then growing out to the paragraph and story level. And ELPS 10, demonstrate command of conventions of standard English to communicate and level appropriate speech and writing. So you can see here that there are just so many ways that we can align standards with the activities that we're doing in the classroom. I have to just come over to the chat and read what Mirtha said. She said, sharing recipes is a great project direction for many students. Have used the children's picture book, Everybody Cooks Rice by Nora Dooley to have students share rice recipes. I share rice recipes all the time, Mirtha. My father, I'm Persian. On my father's side, I mean, you want to talk about a plethora of rice dishes. Persians know how to cook rice. And I'm Cuban on my mother's side. So, knowing different things to put on top of rice, like frijoles negros, or mix it up for moros. All these kind. I love sharing rice recipes. So thank you for sharing that, Mirtha. That brings out a love and a passion for rice in me. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so speaking of sharing and continue to sharing activity ideas. Is share an activity of how you could leverage the funds of knowledge your students bring to the classroom. So one thing I'm just reading here, Dawn said that one thing that is helpful for me is that we have a landscaping class here, and I use some of the information from that class to introduce gardening techniques to the students. Those that have experience in this area also chime in and instruct the class on those areas. And Dawn, isn't it amazing when we discuss these topics that students have this wealth of knowledge around language, communication, speaking in English becomes that much easier. It's almost like you forget that there might be some learner anxiety, some kind of anxiety around speaking, that just brings out this kind of motivation, this adrenaline to share our funds of knowledge, especially when we create this safe space and we develop an environment that allows this sharing of our funds of knowledge, and this community basically of learning. Christine says accountants in my class could give info regarding budgets. Absolutely, Christine. Please invite me to your class for that activity. I think I could use some budgeting advice. So yeah, I mean, you can have, this would be a great activity to do along with your colleagues as well as your school. And so, brainstorming these kind of ways of saying, okay, either you're doing that individually or with a colleague and saying, I'm planning my week out, how can I keep in mind to the forefront of how can I leverage the strengths, the funds of knowledge that my students bring to connect the content to their funds of knowledge. So I'm gonna see here. Marianne says, when talking about jobs, I have students present a few sentences about their job that they have here or had in their country. So Marianne, that's just a great way to compare work experiences, compare, you know, expectations around interacting with coworkers, interacting with employers. Um, what are the expectations that employers have of employees? And what does it take to really, thrive in those new environments where oftentimes when our students don't have a clarity or confidence around certain areas of expectations of how to engage and to behave, what can tend to happen is avoidance. And so it's easy to just kind of like shrink and hide and avoid because we're not confident and clear of how to engage. And so if we can build that clarity, that confidence, that knowledge, in the classroom, our students are going to feel that much more confident in engaging in the workplace, in the community. Some of my colleagues, we were presenting. She presented a lesson plan on helping parents to engage with teachers and administrators at their children's school. And so talking about the dimensions of, what funds of knowledge do they bring as parents that they can discuss with teachers and administrators to support the teaching and the learning of their child. Okay, and Shannon says student presentations are an easy but time-consuming, yes, way to have students share something special about their culture, country. I've also had higher level students write a process paragraph where they teach and explain how to do something to someone else. Shannon, I feel you on those student presentations are time consuming. One thing that you might want to consider and that has really been beneficial, as well as the integrated digital literacy skills, is having students create slideshow presentations, kind of like what I'm doing now, where I'm narrating slides, but those are recorded. And then those are shared either on a discussion board or through a blog, and students can view those. We can view those, in a way that doesn't take time away from what's in the classroom. So just another kind of an idea there of presenting so. Students can, again, integrate digital literacy and then share those. And then it's also kind of adding to their portfolio. So as they're doing a number of these, they can reflect back on kind of where they started and how they are improving. And Paul says, ask students to envision their ideal futures. Yes, Paul, I love these envisioning activities. Where would they be in 5 years? What would they like to be in 5 years? Or same questions about their children. Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. You are amazing. Okay, so much more that we can discuss around that, but I want to be too respectful of your time. And I just wanted to share resources here that have been beneficial to me, as well as leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for me or for our colleagues here in the chat, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we can spend a minute to discuss those a little bit. I'll activate my video here. Just give you all a minute to, if you have any questions while you are maybe formulating those questions. I'm going to just read here what Dawn says, and she says, since my students are incarcerated adults, I asked them to create a lesson for one of the chosen days on a subject they're interested and experienced in. Then on that day, the student becomes the teacher and does the class for that time frame. Okay, that's beautiful, Dawn. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, giving that responsibility to our students to lead a class. I know how it is when I'm presenting, for example, that elevates me to a new level. So, providing those opportunities for students and supporting them, and preparing those lessons and facilitating and engaging in those lessons and leading the class or leading a group even, right, is so empowering. Um, and so, yeah, Marianne, I'm actually going to that the resources are actually on this PDF on the IPDA website. So I encourage you just to download the PDF, and that'll be available to you there as well. So, well, everybody, with that said, please stay connected with IPDA. Stay connected with me as well. You can connect with me here through LinkedIn. There's my scan QR code there. And I'm doing a lot of great things here with my colleagues at IPDA and of course with the Florida Department of Education. I'd like to thank them as well for all of what you do to provide the support for webinars such as these, as well as just other professional development opportunities. So your efforts are appreciated. Thank you. And please give IPDA your feedback. So if you would just take a minute to take this feedback survey, we would be very appreciative of that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Renee, Edwina, Mary, and Thane, Marianne. Thank you, everybody. Dawn, Paul, Angela, Amy, for all of you being here. I hope that I can meet you in person one of these days soon. And again, please stay connected with IPDA as well as with me if you like. Rijaya Derim, Paul. Rijaya Derim. Oh, and one last thing before we close here. If you like that music at the beginning, I'll put here, that was the Maharaja Flamenco Trio. So I'll put mftrio.com in the chat. And that is if, oh, that's not Metro, it's MFT, autocorrect, sorry, dot MF. It's not letting me do, here we go, come on. Here we go, mftrio.com. That's a Maharaja Flamenco Trio. That's actually my band. So if you like some nice flamenco, nuevo flamenco music to for your day, then check out mftrio.com. And it's music is like I said, music is medicine. So discussing that what music your students enjoy, and you know what knowledge they have around that, bringing that to the classroom. Let them play DJ for music throughout the class is always a great thing to do as well. Okay, everybody, wishing you all a very healthy and happy summer. Take care.